It is reported that some of the last words ever spoken by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were to a saxophone player named Ben Branch. Dr. King is reported to have leaned over the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis and said, "Ben, be sure to play my favorite song tonight, Precious Lord. Play it real pretty." Just days later, Mahalia Jackson was singing Precious Lord at Dr. King's funeral. Now, you may already know the backstory of Precious Lord. That on a hot summer day in 1932, Thomas Dorsey, the great blues and gospel singer, said goodbye to his pregnant wife in Chicago and left for a gig in St. Louis. While he was there, he received word that his wife and their infant son had died unexpectedly. Dorsey, as you can imagine, was thrown into despair and vowed he would never sing or write another note of gospel music. But there was a friend who stood by him, and one day that friend led him to a piano in a college classroom, and Dorsey began to play and to cry and to sing. And at some point, the words came to him, "Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I'm tired, I'm weak, I'm worn." Pam McAllister writes that in the depth of his despair, the words and music of this hymn came to him as if dictated by a great and compassionate force in the universe. Its composition healed him. Days later, it was sung by the choir at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, where Reverend Martin Luther King Sr. was pastor. And so it was that out of the depths, Precious Lord came into the life of Dr. King Jr. and ultimately became part of Dr. King's legacy. So when Psalm 130 begins with "out of the depths," you might imagine that there's a story there. The psalm has been linked to the story of the death of Saul and Jonathan in 2 Samuel 1. David hears the news and he cries out in his grief, "How the mighty have fallen! Jonathan! Jonathan lies slain upon your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Greatly beloved were you to me. Your love to me was wonderful, passing even the love of women." Like Precious Lord, take my hand. Psalm 130 has a backstory, and I've been suggesting that there's a backstory to Psalm 23 as well. That could be 1 Samuel 15 and 16, where Samuel anoints David. Hey, you've heard this now. This is the third Sunday. So you've got it, right? So it is that Samuel anoints David's head with oil. "You anoint my head with oil." That's Psalm 23. Anointing David king when Israel already has one. Out of the depths of Samuel's disappointment with the powers that be comes this promise of comfort and confidence for those who are called to the difficult and the dangerous work of resistance, for those who are led in the paths of righteousness or led in the paths of justice. The backstory for Psalm 51 might be 2 Samuel 11 and 12, that David's famous infidelity with Bathsheba. It's a story, as I said last week, not only about individual moral failure, but is an indictment of the systemic way that culture had come to treat women as possessions and playthings. Out of the depths of that individual and institutional sin, the psalmist cries out for something beyond more guilt and more shame. "Create in me a clean heart. Restore to me the joy of your salvation." Frankly, I don't know about you, but I don't know that any more guilt or any more shame will get us anywhere. Right? I can imagine that joy celebrating the things that really matter, joy, might have a chance at changing the world. Now, the backstory of Psalm 130 is the death of Saul and David's beloved Jonathan. It's a story that comes out of the depths of loss. It's like Thomas Dorsey writing, "Precious Lord," out of the depths of that shocking loss of his wife and child. It's like us singing, "Precious Lord," out of the depths of that loss of Dr. King. But Stephen Brecht-Reed says that the Hebrew word for depths in this psalm is a reference to chaotic force that challenge human life. It comes from the mythology of the surrounding cultures where the sea was, with its unfathomable depths and its capacity for destruction, was identified with evil. That's where we get the whole idea of the sea monster, Leviathan. And I've noticed something. There is a connection between loss and chaos. I lose my phone, and there is chaos. I lose my keys, and the whole world is turned upside down. And I know it's true for some of you, because sometimes you leave your phone and your keys here. And we get those panicked phone calls. Chaos. If you lose a job, or a home, or a relationship, there can be chaos. You can get disoriented. Things don't make sense anymore. Maybe you even start to wonder who you are. The deaths of Saul and Jonathan were not simply a personal loss for David. That loss launched the whole nation into political chaos. Because see, David didn't come to the phone. Now I'm stuck. David didn't come to the throne right away. There was confusion and competing claims and struggle and chaos. And I discovered that sometimes chaos creates loss. Chaos disrupts that well-ordered life that you hope you might have. You imagine the illusion you create of that great order of your life, right? Sometimes chaos comes along and it creates a loss of that perception that we have been feeding. And I'll tell you that in this time of our own national chaos, you feel it, right? This time of our own national chaos, which is, I think, by design. Let's not be fooled. There's a reason that everything seems to be up for grabs. In this time of national chaos, we've lost any sense of who we at least thought we were. As Pastor Anita talked about a couple of weeks ago, the chaos makes us cynical. We don't even trust good news anymore. And we lose all hope of ever being the nation we imagine. Out of the depths in Psalm 130 taps into all those stories we have to tell about the connection between loss and chaos. Now, if our ancestors saw the depths of the sea as a metaphor for the evil of chaos, it was the job of the divine to control it. And that's why they had all these elaborate rituals to reorder the world and to stave off chaos. And so it is that we have this creation story in Genesis that says, you know it, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and the Spirit moved on the face of the deep. In other words, out of the depths of this chaos, the Spirit creates something new. Now, beloved ones, I have been around long enough to know that when someone is in the depths, the last thing they want to hear is that everything will be okay. Can we just make a pact? When someone's in the depths, the thing you're not going to say is, it will be okay. Because it won't. If being okay means that everything will go back to the way it was, it won't. Loss and chaos make going back to the way things were impossible. It is the nature of loss and chaos to give birth to something new, whether we like it or not. Thomas Dorsey knew that the loss of his wife and child and the chaos that made of his life meant that things would never be the same. Someday, something new would show up on the horizon. So he wrote, "Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light." What is that old creation story? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was in chaos, and the Spirit moved on the face of the deep on that chaos, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. I think the people who want to make America great again want to go back to an America that not only never was, but never should be. And those of us with progressive values, I think sometimes, honestly, friends, I think sometimes we want to go back to the glory days of the 60s and the civil rights movement, or maybe just as far back as the Obama administration. Oh, Lord. But beloved ones, the truth is, we are in the depths. We are living in loss and chaos, and there is no going back. In my own life, when I am in the depths of loss and chaos, all I want to do is for things to go back the way they were before, whether they were the good old days or not. I remember when I was in college, there was a Christian singer who had a song called, "So You Want to Go Back to Egypt." Here you are out you've been delivered, but here you are out in the wilderness. You've had all this loss and all this chaos, and the only thing you can think about is going back to Egypt, back to slavery. Sorry, friends. There's no going back. Saul and Jonathan aren't coming back. Thomas Dorsey's wife and child weren't coming back. Dr. King isn't coming back. The America of the past isn't coming back. The Seattle First Baptist Church of the glory days, sorry friends, it's not coming back. There is only one possibility. Something new. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light, Thomas Dorsey says. Or as Psalm 130 says, out of the depths we cry to you. Our souls are like those who watch all night for the morning, more than those who wait for the sun to rise. I remember my dad. You know, my dad and I didn't agree about just about anything. We didn't agree about politics or theology. We didn't even agree about me most of the time. But my dad did know some things. And my dad used to say that when people are in those deep places of loss and chaos, ask them to name one thing that they know. And even if it's just that the sun will come up in the morning, that might be enough. Out of the depths we cry to you. Our souls are like those who watch all night for the morning, like those who wait for the sun to rise. I will remind you of a story I have told a lot, a whole bunch of times. It's the story of Horatio Spafford. In the mid-1800s, Horatio was a wealthy businessman in Chicago, and he was a dedicated evangelical Christian. Horatio and his wife, Anne, lost their only son to scarlet fever at age 4. And a year later, they lost most of their wealth in the Great Chicago Fire, within 1 year. Trying to recover from all this, Horatio sent his wife and 4 daughters off to England to take a little break from it all. And they were going to go there to be part of the great revivals of Dwight Moody and Ira Sankey. And on the crossing, the ship carrying Horatio's wife and daughters was struck by another ship, and within 12 minutes, the ship that they were on went down, and all 4 daughters died. Only his wife Anna survived. I paid for that right there. Crossing the Atlantic to meet Anna, the ship captain called Horatio to the deck near the place where his daughters had gone down in the sea. I don't know what would have made the ship captain think that was a good idea. And the story is that out of those depths, literally, out of those depths, Horatio went back to his cabin and began to write, "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll." Out of the depths of that loss and its chaos, Horatio and Anna returned to their church community in Chicago, where members of that community tried to be helpful by figuring out what great sin it must have been. That's always helpful. What great sin it must have been that the Spaffords had committed that they would deserve such tragic punishment from God. So, Horatio wrote, My sin? Really? My sin, oh the bliss of this glorious thought, my sin, not in part, but the whole, is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. And whether I agree with the theology or not, I get it. I get it that he is not going to bear that anymore. This is not about sin. This is not about my sin or anyone else's. They're not going to pin this one on me. Because my sin, not in part, but the whole, is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Now, you would probably not be surprised to know that the Spaffords had had just about enough of American Christianity. So Horatio and Anna gathered up a group of friends, and they moved to Jerusalem, where they would wait together for a whole new day. So Horatio wrote, O Lord, haste the day when my face shall be sight, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. And while they waited, the Spaffords and their friends started moving toward that day. They built a children's center. Imagine. Having lost all of those, they built a children's center and a gathering place for Jews and Christians and Muslims to deal together with the trauma of loss and conflict in their lives and in their city. Out of the depths, the Spaffords Children's Center in Jerusalem was created, and it continues to this day, facing toward that new day of peace and understanding. Horatio and Anna's children were not coming back. The evangelical Christianity they had held on to was not working. Whatever vision they had for their lives and their future in Chicago was not coming back. The only thing to do was to wait for the sun to rise and to move in the direction of a new day. Beloved ones, I don't know what depths you might be living in right now, and I wouldn't presume to tell you that it will be okay if that means hoping you can just go back to the way things were. I know something of the depths of loss and chaos that we're all living in right now in this country. And I will not claim that we have any hope of going back to another America. What I do know, and what David and Thomas Dorsey and Dr. King and Horatio and Anna Spafford and my dad would tell you, is that out of the depths comes a new day. And today, in whatever depths you find yourself, if you hear that voice whispering in your soul, it is well, it is well, then please, for your sake, for God's sake, for the world's sake, do not harden